Part 1. Margaret Walker, 68 years old and brimming with anticipation, carefully navigated the bustling parking lot of Greenfield department store. She carried several brightly wrapped gift bags, each containing a small piece of her heart. After 3 long years without seeing her daughter, Rachel, and her 2 grandchildren, Margaret's life had grown achingly quiet. The echo of an empty house had become her daily companion since her husband's passing over a year ago. But this Christmas felt different. Rachel was returning from Germany with the kids to spend the holidays together. The promise of family under one roof again filled Margaret with a fragile but joyful hope. Despite the bite of the cold night air against her cheeks and the ache in her knee, she moved through the parking lot with determined steps, fueled by the thought of a warm reunion. The store's bright neon sign glowed overhead, casting long shadows across rows of parked cars. People hurried by, loaded with last-minute shopping bags. Holiday music piped through tinny speakers near the store's entrance. Margaret managed a small smile as she thought of her grandchildren, 8-year-old Lucy and 6-year-old Oliver, whom she would finally hold in her arms again. Each gift in her bags had been chosen with great care, from stuffed animals to storybooks, all meant to make up for lost time. Just as she neared her old sedan, a voice from a passing stranger caught her attention. A middle-aged woman spoke loudly on her phone, complaining about a reckless biker who nearly ran her over. The mention of a biker gave Margaret pause. She scanned the lot, her gaze drifting to a row of motorcycles parked under a flickering lamppost. For a moment she saw nothing unusual, yet a chill crawled up her spine. The woman's warning echoed in her mind. People like that shouldn't be allowed to drive. Shaking off the unease, Margaret resumed her walk. The cold wind nipped at her gloved hands, and she silently reminded herself that she had to get home quickly. There was still much to prepare for Rachel's arrival. But as she passed by the motorcycles, she noticed one in particular, a sleek, black machine that seemed to gleam menacingly under the sputtering light. Next to it stood a man in a leather jacket, his face partially obscured by the shadow. Their eyes met briefly. Something in his stare, an odd blend of cruelty and amusement, sent a prickling sensation across Margaret's skin. She quickly averted her gaze, feeling her pulse quicken. She told herself she was being paranoid. After all, it was the holiday season. Perhaps the man was simply waiting for a friend. Yet the tension in her chest wouldn't subside. She walked faster, hugging the gift bags close, the plastic handles biting into her palms. Suddenly, the motorcyclist's engine roared to life, startling her. She glanced back and saw the biker now straddling the seat, revving the engine loudly. The noise echoed through the parking lot, turning a few heads. Margaret forced herself to focus on her car, telling herself she'd be safe once she got inside and locked the doors. But safety was about to prove elusive. The biker accelerated, weaving between parked cars heading in her direction. She could hear the rumble of the engine growing closer. Her heart hammered in her chest. She took a few hurried steps, almost stumbling over a crack in the pavement. Then, it happened. The motorcycle skidded to a stop just a few feet in front of her, blocking her path. The biker, a man with short, dark hair and a thin, mocking grin, tilted his head as if studying her. His leather jacket caught the reflection of the overhead lights, making the studs gleam. "Hey there, Grandma," he drawled, voice dripping with sarcasm. "Carrying all those presents for me." Margaret froze, eyes wide. She clutched her bags protectively. Excuse me," she managed, trying to skirt around him. But he revved the engine again, lurching the bike sideways to cut her off. The harsh smell of exhaust filled her nostrils. "Where you going in such a hurry?" he sneered, shifting his weight. "Don't you want to share some Christmas cheer?" Margaret's mouth went dry. The man's expression held a sadistic glee. This wasn't just a random encounter, he was enjoying her fear. "Please, let me pass," she whispered, glancing around for anyone who might help. Most shoppers were inside the store or too far away to notice. He smirked. "Oh, I'll let you pass when I feel like it." A flicker of movement in the distance caught Margaret's eye. Someone was leaning against a dark sedan, watching. She couldn't make out the person's face, but the silhouette was tall and composed. For a split second, she wondered if help might be near. But then the biker revved the engine again, drawing her attention back to the immediate threat. "See, on, Grandma," he jeered. "Show me what you got in those bags. Something nice for your grandchildren, maybe." Margaret's heart pounded. She tried to move around him, but the biker jerked the handlebars, forcing her back a step. The intimidation was as clear as day. She glanced down at her trembling hands, trying to steady herself. Suddenly, he killed the engine and hopped off the motorcycle. He towered over her by a good foot, the odor of cigarettes clinging to his leather jacket. His eyes glinted with malevolence as he snatched at one of her gift bags. Margaret gasped, pulling back, but his grip tore the plastic handle. "Let me see," he said, rummaging inside and pulling out a stuffed bear meant for Lucy. "Ah, how cute." His mocking tone cut deeper than any blade. Margaret's voice shook. "Please, put that back." He kicked the gift bag away, scattering the other items. "Dante, tell me what to do," he snapped, stepping closer. "You are in my parking lot now." Margaret felt tears burning at the corners of her eyes. She tried to kneel to gather the spilled presents, but a sharp pain in her knee made her wince. That moment of vulnerability seemed to amuse him. He let out a short, cruel laugh. "You should have stayed home," he hissed, pushing her shoulder lightly but forcefully enough that she stumbled. Her glasses slipped down her nose. "It's dangerous out here for old ladies." Just then, a slow, measured sound of footsteps approached. Margaret's gaze lifted from the ground to see the silhouette from before stepping into the glow of a nearby lamp. He wore a simple jacket and jeans, but there was something unmistakably confident in his bearing. As he came into clearer view, Margaret's eyes widened. She recognized the face. Though it was surreal to see him here, Michael Jordan, the legendary athlete and philanthropist. He moved with a calm assurance that somehow made the entire parking lot feel different, less chaotic, more contained. The biker turned, momentarily startled. Then he barked out a laugh. "Michael Jordan, really? You gotta be kidding me." His grin twisted into scorn. "What? You think you're about to save the day? This isn't some celebrity charity event, man." Michael Jordan stopped a few steps away, his eyes flicking from Margaret's frightened expression to the torn gift bags. He spoke quietly, but his tone was firm. "Let her go. There was no reason for this." The biker rolled his eyes. "Why don't you walk away, hero? This is none of your business." Michael's gaze hardened. When someone is getting hurt, it is everyone's business. He gestured calmly toward the gifts scattered on the asphalt. "Those belong to her. Hand them back." The biker's lips curled. "You are delusional if you think I'm taking orders from you." Without warning, he pulled a small pocket knife from his jacket, flicking it open with a snap. Margaret gasped, scrambling backward. Michael's face remained composed, though a hint of tension rippled across his jaw. "You don't want to do this," he said evenly. "I am giving you a chance to leave before this escalates." The biker spat on the ground, brandishing the knife. "You think I'm scared of some basketball star?" he snarled. "You step in my way, you will get cut." Margaret's mind raced, adrenaline surging. She clutched a gift box to her chest as if it were a shield. The standoff felt electric. She wanted to scream for help, but her voice refused to come. Michael Jordan slowly raised his hands, palms outward. "I don't want trouble," he said, "but I wanted to let you harm her." For a moment, time seemed to freeze. The biker eyed Michael's stance, possibly realizing that the man before him was no ordinary bystander. The tension in the air was palpable, like a rubber band stretched to its limit. Then the biker lunged, knife gleaming under the overhead lamp. Michael sidestepped swiftly, grabbing the biker's wrist and twisting it downward. The knife clattered to the ground, and with a quick pivot, Michael used the biker's momentum to send him stumbling. The man hit the pavement hard, cursing and scrambling to regain his footing. Margaret watched in stunned silence. Her heart hammered so fiercely she could barely breathe. The biker, enraged, grabbed his helmet and hurled it at Michael, who ducked smoothly, letting it sail past and bounce on the asphalt. "You're gonna regret this," the biker roared, rushing forward again. Michael deflected the clumsy strike, hooking the man's arm and forcing him into a half-spin. Before the biker could lash out a third time, Michael locked him in place with a practiced hold. The man struggled, but Michael's grip held firm. Margaret's knees trembled, not just from fear, but from an overwhelming sense of relief. The predator was pinned. The harsh panting of the biker mixed with the distant hum of passing cars. Michael glanced at Margaret, his voice low but calm. "Are you all right?" She nodded shakily, tears now slipping down her cheeks. Yes, thank you." The biker spat another string of curses, thrashing in vain. "You don't know who you're messin' with," he hissed. Michael tightened his hold just enough to quell the struggle. "I think you've done enough," he said quietly. "Now, you will wait here until we can call the authorities." Margaret exhaled a shaky breath. My phone is in the car." She gestured toward her sedan, which was only a few feet away. Michael gave a short nod. "It is okay, we'll handle this." Suddenly, the faint wail of sirens cut through the air. Someone else in the parking lot must have called the police. The biker's eyes widened with panic, and he renewed his attempts to break free. But Michael's hold remained unyielding. "No more fighting," Michael said, his voice steely. "It's over." And indeed, for the biker, it was over. As red and blue lights swept across the lot, Margaret's world seemed to come into sharp focus. The gift boxes on the ground, the ache in her knee, and the profound sense of gratitude coursing through her veins. She had been moments away from a terrible fate. But a stranger, no. A legendary figure had stepped in to protect her. The sirens grew louder, and the flashing lights cast dancing shadows on the pavement. Margaret clutched one of her presents tightly, tears of relief streaming down her cheeks. She never would have imagined that a late-night trip to the store could turn into such a nightmare. Nor would she have believed that Michael Jordan himself would be the one to save her. In that instant, she understood that Christmas miracles come in many forms. Sometimes it's a hero appearing at just the right moment, reminding the world that compassion and courage can outshine any darkness, even if that darkness lurks in the form of a cruel biker in a deserted parking lot. As the red and blue flashes danced over the asphalt, the biker lay restrained on the cold pavement, his anger and defiance slowly fading into bitter resignation. Michael Jordan, still standing a few feet away, maintained a protective vigil over Margaret, whose trembling form was slowly rising with the help of a nearby officer. The echo of sirens filled the night, and the air felt heavy with relief and lingering tension. Within moments, 2 police officers rushed toward the scene. One of them, a stern-looking man in a Navy uniform with a reassuring voice, knelt beside Margaret. "Ma'am, are you hurt?" he asked gently as he carefully examined her injured knee and the scattered remnants of her gifts. Margaret, still in shock, managed a trembling, I am okay, thank you." Her eyes, wide with residual fear, darted between the officer and Michael, who continued to keep a firm yet calm presence near her. The other officer, after ensuring that the biker was securely handcuffed, began questioning him in a low, measured tone. The biker's curses were muffled by his resignation, and soon it became clear that his reign of terror in the parking lot would not continue tonight. Michael Jordan's quiet determination had disarmed not only the weapon, but the very cruelty that had threatened Margaret's safe passage. While the police escorted the biker to the waiting squad car, Bradley Monroe, the manager of Greenfield Department Store, arrived on the scene with a mix of concern and regret on his face. "This isn't how we want our customers to feel," he muttered to himself as he spoke briefly with the officers. He then turned to Margaret with an apologetic tone. "I'm so sorry, ma'am. We take matters like these very seriously. Let me get you some help." Bradley immediately arranged for a store-assigned ambulance to transport Margaret to a nearby clinic for a quick checkup, even though her injuries seemed minor. "Your safety is our priority," he assured her, his eyes reflecting both remorse and a promise to tighten security measures. Margaret, clutching a slightly torn gift bag to her chest, nodded in silent gratitude. In that moment, the cruelty of the biker was replaced by the warmth of community concern. Michael Jordan stepped forward once again, his calm gaze never wavering from Margaret's. "I'll make sure you get the care you need," he said, his deep voice resonating with sincerity. With his help, an officer helped Margaret into the ambulance. Before she was lifted away, she managed a whispered, "Thank you, you saved my Christmas." Michael simply nodded, his eyes kind and resolute. Inside the store's quiet foyer, as the ambulance's siren faded into the distance, a small group of onlookers began to murmur about the extraordinary events. Some had caught glimpses of the entire confrontation on their phone cameras, while others had simply witnessed the heroic intervention. Among them was a local news reporter who hastily took notes, certain that this night would spark headlines for weeks to come. Within a short time, the local media swarmed the scene. The story, initially about a heartless biker terrorizing a vulnerable elderly woman, had now transformed into a tale of redemption, bravery, and community solidarity. The reporter's voice trembled with excitement as she interviewed one of the officers. It's remarkable an ordinary evening turned into an extraordinary act of heroism when Michael Jordan stepped in. No one expected such a legendary figure to be at our local parking lot, and yet he was there when it mattered most, back at the police station. The biker was processed and charged with multiple counts of harassment and assault. The evidence, including the clear video recordings and eyewitness testimonies, would later force the local authorities to reevaluate their policies regarding unsavory behavior in public spaces. Even as the biker muttered defiant threats, the atmosphere around him was already shifting from menace to accountability. Meanwhile, in a quiet corner of the parking lot, as the crowd began to disperse, Michael Jordan lingered. He quietly exchanged a few words with Bradley Monroe and a couple of store employees, urging them to bolster security measures and offer support to any customer who might feel threatened in the future. Everyone deserves to feel safe, he reminded them, his tone firm yet compassionate. Sometimes, it is the smallest acts of vigilance that prevent the darkest moments. Hours later, after the chaos had subsided and the store began closing for the night, a sense of calm fell over the community. News of the heroic intervention had spread quickly through social media and local channels. The once turbulent parking lot now felt like hallowed ground, a place where cruelty had been met with courage and where an ordinary woman's Christmas was salvaged by an extraordinary act of kindness. At the local clinic, Margaret sat in a small recovery room. Though her knee was tender and a bruise was forming, she felt an overwhelming surge of relief and gratitude. A kind nurse, having heard the full account, offered her a warm blanket and a cup of tea. "You're safe now, Ma'am," the nurse said softly, placing a reassuring hand on her arm. Sometimes, heroes show up when we least expect them. Margaret's mind drifted back to the moment when Michael Jordan had locked eyes with her. His intervention had been swift and precise, a beacon of hope amid a night marred by cruelty. Despite the pain, she felt that her long, lonely wait for family reunion might still be filled with joy. She closed her eyes for a moment, envisioning Rachel, her daughter, and the laughter of her grandchildren. In that quiet instant, she resolved that this Christmas, though shaken by the events of the night, would ultimately be one of resilience and renewed faith in humanity. Later that night, a message arrived on her old cell phone. It was from a concerned neighbor who had witnessed the incident. "Mrs. Walker, I just wanted you to know that Michael Jordan and the police took care of everything. Please rest well and remember that you are not alone." The simplicity of the message warmed her heart. She replied with a quiet thank you, feeling that even in darkness, the light of human kindness could shine through. Meanwhile, Michael Jordan, having stepped out of the spotlight as discreetly as he had arrived, returned to his quiet evening. He knew that true heroism wasn't about being celebrated in headlines, it was about quietly ensuring that no one in need was left behind. Later, in his modest apartment, he reflected on the night's events. He reviewed messages from local organizers and police commendations, each one a testament to the ripple effects of his intervention. Yet, his thoughts were not on glory but on the simple truth that compassion must always prevail over cruelty. The following morning, as dawn broke over Maple Grove, the community began to awaken to the news. Newspaper headlines read, "Local hero saves elderly woman from biker's bullying," and "Christmas miracle Michael Jordan's timely intervention brings hope." The story had ignited a wave of local support for improved safety measures at public venues. Greenfield Department Store promptly announced plans to upgrade its security and offer training for its staff on de-escalation techniques, a direct result of the night's events. For Margaret, the next day brought a new beginning. After receiving a clean bill of health at the clinic, she was soon visited by a social worker from the community center, who offered assistance with daily errands and connected her with a local support group for seniors. "It's important that you feel safe and supported," the social worker said kindly. "We are here to help you rebuild, not just for Christmas, but for every day to come." Margaret, though still shaken, felt a cautious optimism. The night had been harrowing, but it had also shown her that even in the midst of cruelty, there were people willing to stand up for what was right. She thought of the many faces from that night, the store manager's determined apology, the officer's gentle reassurance, and Michael Jordan's quiet resolve. Each of these moments reaffirmed her belief that hope could rise from the ashes of despair. In the weeks that followed, local authorities tightened security around the department store's parking lot, and community meetings were held to discuss ways to protect vulnerable citizens. The story also sparked conversations about mental health, elder abuse, and the importance of looking out for one another, topics that resonated deeply in a town that prided itself on neighborly care. Back at Greenfield Department Store, Russell, now under a probationary period and having completed his sensitivity training, worked diligently to rebuild his reputation. He frequently recalled the look of relief on Margaret's face and the calm, unwavering stance of Michael Jordan. Determined to transform his past misdeeds into a lesson for himself, he began volunteering at local community centers, speaking to others about the importance of empathy and respect. His journey toward redemption was slow and often painful, but with every kind word and every gesture of forgiveness from those around him, he took a step closer to becoming a better man. As the days turned into weeks, Margaret's story became a symbol of hope across Maple Grove. Social media posts, local news segments, and community bulletins shared updates on her recovery and the lasting impact of that cold Christmas night. Neighbors organized small charity drives, and local schools invited speakers to discuss the importance of community and respect for the elderly. In a way, the painful night had inadvertently sown the seeds for a stronger, more compassionate community. One crisp morning, as Margaret prepared breakfast in her modest kitchen, she received a call from her daughter, Rachel. The joy in Rachel's voice was unmistakable as she spoke of the upcoming family reunion. "Mom, we all coming over next weekend. I can't wait to hug you and see the kids," Rachel exclaimed. Hearing this, Margaret felt tears of joy mixing with the lingering memories of the previous night. "IV had the hardest Christmas of my life, but it turns out it wasn't so bad after all," she whispered to herself, a fragile smile playing on her lips. In a final act of quiet defiance against the cruelty of that night, Margaret gathered the scattered gifts she had managed to save. Though some packages were crumpled and torn, they were imbued with a new meaning, a symbol of survival and a testament to the power of human kindness. As she rewrapped the gifts carefully, she realized that despite the scars, her spirit had been renewed. The pain of the encounter would always be part of her history, but it no longer defined her future. As the story of that fateful night continued to ripple through Maple Grove and beyond, the legacy of courage, resilience, and compassion was firmly established. Michael Jordan's intervention, Russell's redemptive journey, and Margaret's brave stand had collectively transformed a moment of horror into a powerful reminder that even in our darkest hours, hope and kindness can prevail. In the days that followed the harrowing incident, the chilly parking lot of Greenfield Department Store transformed from a scene of terror into a symbol of community resilience. Margaret Walker, though still nursing a tender knee and bruises both physical and emotional, slowly began to reclaim her strength. After being checked at the clinic and released with reassuring words from caring nurses, she returned to her modest apartment with a cautious optimism. Her heart, though scarred from the cruelty of that night, now beat with the hope that family and community could mend what had been broken. Margaret's story was no longer confined to whispered conversations among bystanders. It had exploded onto the local news. Every morning as she sat down for her meager breakfast, a fresh headline reminded her local hero saves elderly woman from biker's bullying. Yet beneath the sensational titles lay a deeper message. Neighbors gathered in small groups near the department store and at community centers, discussing the lessons learned that night and urging one another to look out for those who felt vulnerable. At the Greenfield Department Store, Bradley Monroe, the store manager, moved quickly to implement changes. In a town where every face was familiar, customer safety became a top priority. Security cameras were upgraded, and additional personnel were stationed in the parking lot during late hours. Staff training sessions on conflict de-escalation were organized, with an emphasis on empathy and respect. Bradley himself made rounds every evening, checking in on customers and ensuring that the memory of the night's chaos was replaced by a feeling of reassurance. "No one should ever feel unsafe here again," he would say, his tone a blend of regret and determination. Meanwhile, Russell, the cashier who had once been the unwitting instrument of cruelty, was undergoing his own transformation. His 2-week suspension had been a period of painful reflection. Determined to change, Russell enrolled in community-based empathy workshops and found solace in speaking with local counselors about the pressures that had led him to act so callously. He began volunteering at the neighborhood senior center, speaking to other employees about the importance of compassion. Slowly, his fellow staff and even some regular customers started to see a new side of him. In brief moments when he managed to smile genuinely, there was an unspoken hope that he was becoming someone better. One crisp afternoon, as Margaret sat in the waiting area of the local community center for a support group meeting, she noticed a familiar face approaching. It was Russell, not in his uniform but dressed casually, his eyes downcast with regret. "Mrs. Walker," he began softly, "I know I can undo what happened, but I want you to know that I'm truly sorry. I've been trying to make amends by learning to treat everyone with respect." His voice trembled with sincerity, and for a moment, the weight of his earlier cruelty seemed to lift, replaced by a tentative bridge of forgiveness. Margaret studied him for a long moment before nodding. "I appreciate that. Russell, we all have our battles. I just hope you continue to grow from this experience." Their conversation, brief as it was, became a seed for change not only for him, but for everyone who had witnessed his misstep. Elsewhere, Michael Jordan's quiet heroism continued to ripple through the community. Though he had stepped away from the spotlight that night as swiftly as he had arrived, his impact was undeniable. Local organizers invited him to speak at a community safety forum, where he stressed the importance of vigilance and compassion. "A true hero isn't one who seeks the limelight," he told the gathered crowd, "but one who steps forward when others are in need." His words, delivered with calm conviction, resonated deeply with parents, shopkeepers, and even teenagers who had previously taken safety for granted. In one particularly touching scene, Michael visited a community soup kitchen run by a local church. As he quietly served meals, he exchanged smiles and gentle words with the elderly and the disadvantaged. His presence was a reminder that even legends had the power to uplift ordinary lives. "It's about making sure no one feels alone," he said to a volunteer, "because when we all look out for one another, the whole community becomes stronger." Such acts of humility and kindness added layers to his public persona, one that went far beyond his athletic accolades. For Margaret, the aftermath was a time of gradual healing. The support group at the community center became a sanctuary where seniors shared their fears, hopes, and memories of better times. Over cups of tea and gentle laughter, they spoke of past hardships and the unexpected kindness that sometimes emerged from dark moments. One member, a retired teacher, summed it up best: "We were never too old to be surprised by life." Sometimes the smallest act of courage can light up the darkest night. Inspired by these conversations, Margaret began to rewrap the scattered, damaged gifts with care, a symbolic gesture of reclaiming her dignity and turning loss into renewal. Her daughter, Rachel, who had flown in from Germany just in time for the reunion, embraced her mother with tears in her eyes. "Mom, I heard everything that happened," Rachel said, her voice thick with emotion. "I can't believe how strong you are." The reunion, once a distant dream, had turned into a poignant celebration of resilience. As the family gathered around a decorated Christmas tree, sharing stories and laughter, Margaret's heart swelled with both gratitude and relief. The painful memory of that night was now intertwined with the joy of reuniting, a reminder that even the worst moments could eventually yield hope. At the same time, local media continued to cover the story, highlighting not just the dramatic rescue but the community's response. A follow-up piece in the Maple Grove Gazette detailed how security measures had improved, how workshops on kindness were drawing in new participants, and how a charity drive sparked by Russell's initiative had raised funds for seniors in need. The story's headline read, "From Darkness to Light, a Community Rises Together." Photographs showed smiling faces at community events, a transformed parking lot with added lighting, and even a candid shot of Michael Jordan speaking softly with a group of children outside the store. Meanwhile, Russell's journey toward redemption continued to unfold. He began keeping a journal, recording his reflections on each day and the small acts of kindness he witnessed and participated in. On one entry, he wrote, "I never imagined that one terrible night would be the catalyst for so much good. I am determined to honor the forgiveness I received by giving back to this community." His efforts eventually earned him a heartfelt apology from several customers who had once judged him harshly. And slowly, his smile returned, a smile that held a promise of better days. In a quiet moment one evening, while Margaret was attending a community church service, she looked up at the stained glass window depicting a shepherd guiding his flock. In that serene light, she felt a deep connection to the idea that everyone needed guidance and protection at times. The service, filled with soft hymns and gentle prayers, reinforced her belief that love and kindness were the true essence of the season. As she left the church with a newfound peace, she carried with her the memory of Michael Jordan's calm voice and the steady resolve that had saved her that fateful night. By the end of this turbulent period, the story of that cold Christmas night had become a legend in Maple Grove, a reminder that even when cruelty threatened to darken our lives, compassion and courage could restore light. Margaret S. recovery, Russell S. transformation, and Michael Jordan S. quiet heroism had all intertwined to create a tapestry of hope. The lessons learned reverberated throughout the community, prompting ongoing conversations about how best to protect the vulnerable and support those who had faced hardship. For Margaret, each day became an opportunity to celebrate the small miracles: a warm cup of tea, a kind word from a neighbor, a hug from her reunited family. Though the physical scars might take longer to heal, her spirit was now fortified by the knowledge that she was surrounded by love. The gifts, once symbols of the night's terror, had been rewrapped and repurposed into tokens of resilience and the promise of brighter days ahead. As the community moved forward, new safety measures were firmly in place at Greenfield Department Store, and a series of local workshops on empathy, self-defense, and elder care were scheduled. The ripple effects of that unforgettable night continued to inspire, teaching everyone that even in the midst of darkness, the light of kindness could shine through, guiding each person toward a future where no one was ever truly alone. In the weeks following that unforgettable Christmas night, the once haunted parking lot of Greenfield Department Store had slowly transformed into a symbol of renewal and collective responsibility. The ripple effects of Michael Jordan S. decisive intervention, Margaret Walker S. courageous survival, and Russell S. determined journey toward redemption resonated throughout Maple Grove, knitting together the hearts of its citizens. Margaret, though still bearing the physical reminders of that cold, brutal night, a tender knee, bruises along her arms, and a few torn gift bags, found her spirit growing stronger with each passing day. After returning home from the clinic, where compassionate nurses had assured her that her injuries were minor and fully treatable, she embraced the warmth of family and community like never before. Every morning, as sunlight filtered through her modest kitchen window, she rose with a quiet determination to rebuild not only her physical strength, but also her sense of self-worth. In her neighborhood, the story had taken on a mythic quality. Local newspapers and TV segments told of a Christmas miracle, where a legendary figure stepped in to rescue a vulnerable woman from cruelty. Yet for Margaret, the headlines were not as important as the renewed hope they represented. Now, as she prepared for another day, she lovingly rewrapped the salvaged gifts, each package a token of both the night's terror and the resilience that followed. With a steady hand, she restored these gifts, transforming them from symbols of despair into emblems of hope for the family reunion that was soon to come. Meanwhile, at Greenfield Department Store, Bradley Monroe, the store manager, had spearheaded a complete overhaul of security measures. New cameras, additional security personnel, and regular de-escalation training for the staff had become standard protocol. Bradley made frequent rounds in the parking lot, ensuring that every customer felt safe. "We learned a hard lesson that night," he would say to his team. "Our priority is our community's well-being. Every act of cruelty must be met with a commitment to kindness." Across the store's aisles, even Russell, once known for his thoughtless cruelty, was forging a new path. His sensitivity training, coupled with personal counseling and community service at the local senior center, had begun to transform him. Now, with a sincere smile and gentle greetings, he attended to customers with a humility that belied his earlier misdeeds. Every kind word he exchanged felt like a step toward redemption, and his journal, filled with daily reflections and pledges for improvement, became both his guide and his testimony. The once reproached cashier was slowly earning back the trust of many in Maple Grove, even as he continued to volunteer at neighborhood events, speaking openly about the importance of empathy and respect. In the heart of the community, a new initiative was born: a series of local workshops on elder care, conflict resolution, and personal safety, all inspired by the events of that tragic night. Michael Jordan, having accepted an invitation to a community safety forum, delivered a stirring address. Standing before an audience of parents, shopkeepers, and local officials, he spoke with measured passion. True strength lies not in physical power, but in the willingness to protect the vulnerable and to stand up against injustice. When we all look out for one another, we build a community that can overcome any darkness. His words, broadcast on local television, were accompanied by images of the transformed parking lot and testimonials from those whose lives had been touched by his intervention. At the community center where Margaret had found solace and support, meetings grew into lively gatherings. Seniors shared their experiences and fears, forging new bonds over cups of tea and heartfelt stories. The support group, once a small, tentative circle, blossomed into a tight-knit network that not only offered emotional comfort, but also practical help. Volunteers organized monthly outings, assisted with grocery shopping, and even arranged transportation for medical appointments. In this nurturing environment, Margaret discovered that she was not alone. Each shared story was a reminder that resilience could be cultivated even after the deepest wounds. One crisp autumn morning, as Margaret sat in the center's cozy lounge, she received an unexpected call from her daughter, Rachel, who had been in Germany. "Mom, the family reunion is coming sooner than we thought." Rachel's voice sparkled with excitement. "We've arranged to celebrate at the community center, a big, warm gathering with everyone you love." Tears welled in Margaret's eyes as she listened. After years of isolation and hardship, the prospect of reuniting with her daughter and grandchildren filled her with renewed purpose. "I can't wait to see you, my love," she whispered, feeling her heart swell with gratitude. That same day, a local news segment aired a follow-up story. The headline read, "From Cruelty to Compassion, Maple Grove Unites in the Spirit of Christmas." The piece detailed not only Michael Jordan's heroic intervention, but also the community's collective effort to ensure that no one would ever feel so alone again. Viewers saw clips of security upgrades at Greenfield department store, of Russell's sincere public apology video, and of the workshops that had since been established. The reporter's warm tone and thoughtful interviews highlighted how even the darkest nights could yield a dawn of hope. At the same time, Michael Jordan, having left the immediate scene as quietly as he had arrived, continued his low-key efforts to inspire change. He visited local schools and youth centers, offering mentorship and occasionally surprising children with personal visits. His humility and commitment to community welfare elevated him from a mere celebrity to a revered guardian figure in the eyes of Maple Grove's residents. In one moving interview, a local teacher summed up his impact. "He reminded us that heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they just step in at the right moment." As the season wore on, the once painful memory of that night slowly receded into a source of strength. Margaret's family reunion, held on a bright winter day at the community center, was a joyful culmination of all the struggles and triumphs of the past months. The center was adorned with festive decorations, garlands, twinkling lights, and a majestic Christmas tree that shone as a beacon of unity. Family members, neighbors, and even local officials gathered together, sharing laughter, stories, and heartfelt embraces. Margaret, radiant with relief and pride, recounted her ordeal with quiet dignity. "I thought I'd never see the warmth of a true Christmas," she said softly, her eyes glistening with tears of gratitude. "But last winter, a man named Michael Jordan reminded me that hope is real." The celebration was filled with touching moments. Children played games and opened small gifts, their delighted laughter echoing through the hall. Russell, having been invited as a special guest, stood in a corner as many came forward to thank him for his efforts in organizing the kindness drive. Though he carried the weight of his past mistakes, his sincere remorse and ongoing transformation were evident in every word he spoke. "I have learned that no act of cruelty can stand against the power of community and kindness," he told a group of attentive teenagers. "We all must strive to be better for one another." Later that evening, as the reunion drew to a close, Margaret stepped outside into the crisp night air. The stars above shone brightly, and a gentle wind carried the promise of a new day. In that quiet moment, she took out the now well-worn slip of paper, the phone number for the Champions Foundation, and smiled. It was a reminder that help, hope, and the power to change lay within reach. Her heart was still healing, but it beat strong with the knowledge that she was cherished and supported. Across town, in a modest apartment that Michael Jordan now called home during his quiet retreats, he sat by a window looking out at Maple Grove. He reviewed letters of thanks from local organizers, read messages of encouragement from neighbors, and even scribbled a few notes in his journal about the transformative power of compassion. For him, The night he stepped into that parking lot was not about celebrity or fame. It was a personal mission to remind the world that heroes exist in the smallest acts of selflessness. When we stand together, he mused quietly, no darkness can ever truly overcome us. As the police cars rolled away and the community continued to mend, the legacy of that cold Christmas night was secured. In the following months, Greenfield Department Store's parking lot became a safe haven, a testament to what could be achieved when people took responsibility for one another. Workshops on empathy and elder care inspired by the night's events flourished, and even the once maligned BIKER story served as a cautionary tale on the consequences of cruelty. In the final moments of that long, turbulent season, Margaret gathered her family around the table for a quiet dinner, a celebration not just of Christmas, but of life renewed. With every shared smile and every gentle word, the pain of the past was slowly replaced by hope. "Thank you," she whispered to the gathering, her voice filled with the quiet power of someone who had endured and emerged stronger. "Thank you for reminding me that even in our darkest hours, the light of kindness will always find a way." And as the night wore on and the last of the holiday lights dimmed, Maple Grove slept with a collective promise that no one would ever have to face cruelty alone again, and that the spirit of compassion would forever guide their way. Months passed since that fateful Christmas night, and Maple Grove had begun to truly embrace change. The transformation initiated by Michael Jordan's intervention and the community's response had slowly settled into everyday life. Yet, as with any real-life story, new challenges arose even amid the newfound hope. A fresh start and lingering shadows. Margaret Walker's recovery was steady, and the family reunion had rekindled the warmth of long-missed connections. Now every morning, Margaret woke to a brighter world. Neighbors greeted her on the street, and the local support groups had grown in numbers and spirit. Greenfield Department Store, now under the vigilant eye of manager Bradley Monroe, had installed additional security measures and maintained a strict code of conduct, ensuring that no customer would ever feel unsafe again. However, beneath the surface of this hopeful community, subtle tensions began to reappear. One crisp autumn morning, as Margaret walked to the community center to attend her weekly support group, she noticed new flyers posted on lampposts, "Community Safety Forum, stand up for your neighbors," and "Voice for the Vulnerable, join the discussion." The announcements called for a town hall meeting to address lingering issues of public safety and community well-being, a reminder that while one battle had been won, the war for kindness and respect was ongoing. At the meeting held in the newly refurbished auditorium of the local community center, residents gathered in earnest. Bradley Monroe stood at the podium, his expression earnest as he recounted the changes implemented since that cold night. "We have made great strides," he declared, "but we must remain vigilant. Our community is strong, but every voice matters in ensuring that no one is ever left in harm's way again." Among the audience, voices of support blended with cautious concerns. Several longtime residents mentioned incidents of petty crimes or acts of vandalism that, while not as severe as the attack on Margaret, still served as reminders that darkness can resurface if complacency takes hold. In the midst of this discussion, a middle-aged woman named Denise, who had once been a victim of harassment herself, raised a question about further improving lighting and establishing a neighborhood watch. The debate was passionate and at times heated, yet it underscored the community's collective resolve to protect the vulnerable. A new challenge on the horizon. Meanwhile, at Greenfield Department Store, Russell, the cashier whose transformation had become a symbol of personal redemption, found himself struggling with mixed emotions. Although he had embraced sensitivity training and was actively involved in community service, he couldn't shake the memories of his past cruelty. His daily journal entries spoke of regret and determination in equal measure. "Every time I see a friendly face at the store, I am reminded of the responsibility I now carry. I must do better not just for myself, but for every person who entrusts us with their safety." Russell had also taken an active role in organizing the Kindness Drive, an event that not only raised funds for seniors, but also fostered a dialogue about respect and empathy among local merchants. At the drive, which was held on a sunny Saturday in the newly improved parking lot, he walked from table to table, greeting shoppers warmly and explaining the importance of contributing to a fund dedicated to supporting the community's most vulnerable. Though some customers remained skeptical of his past actions, Many were touched by his genuine remorse and his willingness to learn from his mistakes. Slowly, his reputation began to shift as stories of his transformation spread on local social media channels. Yet not everyone in Maple Grove was ready to let the past go. Rumors began to circulate that the biker, now identified as a repeat offender with ties to a small local gang, had not entirely vanished from the area. Whispers of his associates roaming nearby, seeking revenge or trying to re-establish their feared reputation, set some residents on edge. Although the police had made arrests and increased patrols following the incident, a sense of vulnerability still lingered in certain corners of the community. An unexpected encounter. One overcast afternoon, as Margaret was returning from a support group meeting, she paused outside her modest home to retrieve a newspaper. The headline blared, "Community Unites, Safety and Kindness Lead the Way in Maple Grove." Reading the uplifting story, she felt a surge of pride and a tinge of worry when a smaller article noted that a known local biker gang had been spotted in the outskirts of town. Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. When she opened it, she found Denise, the same passionate advocate from the town hall meeting, standing with an earnest expression. "Mrs. Walker, I need your help," Denise said softly. "I've heard rumors that the gang might be planning something tonight near the old mill on the edge of town. I know this sounds alarming, but we need to spread the word and be prepared." Margaret's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean, is anyone hurt?" she asked, her voice trembling with concern. "No one yet," Denise replied, "but I can shake the feeling that something's coming. We need to alert the community and possibly work with the local authorities." Denise's eyes shone with determination, and Margaret nodded slowly, understanding that her role in this community might be evolving from that of a victim to that of a voice for safety. That evening, as dusk settled over Maple Grove, a small group of residents gathered at a neighborhood meeting organized by Denise. Among them were several seniors, local shopkeepers, and even a couple of young parents. They huddled in a community hall, discussing the unsettling news and debating how to fortify their beloved town against any future threats. Russell, invited as a guest speaker for his experience in transformation, took a deep breath before addressing the assembly. "I know many of you have doubts about safety after what happened," he began, his voice steady but laced with vulnerability. "I, too, have struggled with the weight of my past actions, but together, we can create an environment where every resident feels protected and valued." His words resonated, drawing nods and murmurs of agreement. In that moment, the meeting transformed from a session of anxious speculation into a proactive planning session. Ideas flowed freely, establishing a local hotline, coordinating with the police for increased patrols during vulnerable hours, and even creating a neighborhood watch system that would include training on how to de-escalate dangerous situations. Though the threat of the biker gang still loomed like a dark cloud on the horizon, the collective determination in that room shone like a beacon of hope. Michael Jordan has continued vigilance. Meanwhile, Michael Jordan, who had long since returned to his quiet routines, remained alert to the pulse of Maple Grove. Even as he focused on mentoring local youth and participating in charity events, he kept a discreet eye on developments in the town. A call from a local community organizer had informed him of the growing concerns about the biker gang, and although he was careful not to overstep, he promised to lend his support wherever needed. One chilly evening, Michael found himself at the Community Safety Forum once again. This time, the forum was larger, filled with concerned citizens, local law enforcement, and community leaders. Standing at the podium, Michael spoke with a rare intensity, his words cutting through the uncertainty. "We cannot allow fear to govern our lives," he declared, his voice firm. "Each one of you has the power to stand up, to support one another, and to build a community that rejects violence in all its forms. Together, we can ensure that no one, especially our most vulnerable, has to suffer in silence." His address was met with applause and raised spirits. Many local residents left the forum with renewed hope, eager to contribute their energy to the newly forming neighborhood watch. For Michael, it was a personal mission to ensure that his previous intervention wasn't an isolated incident, but a catalyst for lasting change, shifting tides and new beginnings. In the weeks that followed, the energy in Maple Grove shifted noticeably. The neighborhood watch became an organized network, with volunteers patrolling streets and even coordinating with local police through an established hotline. Workshops on personal safety and conflict resolution were held in the community center, and even the local school invited speakers to talk about empathy and community responsibility. Margaret continued her weekly support meetings, and her own voice grew stronger as she began sharing her story more openly. Encouraged by the compassionate responses she received, she even agreed to participate in a small video testimonial that local media would air, urging seniors and neighbors alike to remain vigilant and supportive of one another. "We must never forget that kindness is our best defense against cruelty," she said softly in the video, her eyes glistening with a mix of sorrow and hope. Russell's transformation became an inspiring example for many. He started a blog where he recounted his journey from cruelty to compassion, offering tips on customer service, stress management, and the importance of treating every person with dignity. His honest reflections earned him both criticism and praise, but most importantly, they sparked a broader conversation about accountability and growth in the community. As autumn deepened into winter, Maple Grove prepared for another holiday season. The community's proactive efforts paid off when a credible tip led the police to thwart a minor vandalism attempt by members of the biker gang near the old mill. While the incident was quickly contained, it reinforced the message that vigilance was not just a temporary measure, it was a lifelong commitment. One brisk evening, as Margaret walked home from a community event, she paused to look up at the starry sky. In that quiet moment, she reflected on how far they had come. The scars of that dreadful night were still there, but so were the promises of new beginnings. She remembered Denise's rallying cry, Russell's heartfelt apologies, and Michael Jordan's unwavering presence. Every act of kindness, every measure taken to protect the vulnerable, had woven a safety net that now cradled the town. The neighborhood watch, with its growing roster of dedicated volunteers, had earned accolades from the local police chief. During a small ceremony at the community center, the police chief commended the citizens for their vigilance and praised Michael Jordan for his unexpected but life-changing intervention. "It takes a village," the chief said, "and Maple Grove has proven that when we unite, we can overcome even our darkest moments." Epilogue of Hope. By early winter, Maple Grove had not only fortified its streets, but it also nurtured a spirit of unity that transcended past fears. The lessons of that cold Christmas night had matured into a legacy of community action. Margaret's family reunion, now celebrated annually as a day of togetherness, became a much-anticipated event. Neighbors, friends, and even distant relatives gathered to honor the resilience that had defined their small town. In a quiet moment during one such reunion, as children played and adults shared stories over cups of hot cocoa, Margaret gazed around at the smiling faces and whispered to herself, "I've seen darkness, but I've also seen light." Her eyes shone with the wisdom of someone who had weathered storms and emerged with a deeper understanding of love and solidarity. And in the midst of it all, Michael Jordan continued to make surprise visits at community events, always staying in the background yet ever present. His gentle words and thoughtful actions had inspired a generation of Maple Grove residents to look out for one another. Even Russell's blog and heartfelt efforts became a beacon for those seeking to change their ways. As the community embraced the winter chill with warmth in their hearts, a final message echoed through Maple Grove, a promise that no one would ever have to face cruelty alone again. The collective commitment to kindness, safety, and mutual respect was now stronger than ever, a living legacy born from one extraordinary night. In the wake of the dramatic events that had reshaped Maple Grove, the community continued to evolve with both hope and the occasional tremor of uncertainty. While the initiatives launched in the aftermath of that fateful Christmas night had begun to create lasting change, new challenges now emerged, testing the strength of the bonds that had been forged. A festival of renewal. As autumn gave way to a crisp winter, the town council, motivated by the success of recent community efforts, announced the launch of an annual Festival of Renewal. This celebration was intended not only to honor the transformation of Maple Grove, but also to provide a platform for local artisans, entrepreneurs, and community leaders to come together and share their talents. The festival would feature live music, food stalls, interactive workshops on safety and empathy, and a dedicated segment for seniors, celebrating the wisdom and resilience of those who had endured hardship. Margaret Walker, now a well-respected figure among her peers, was invited to open the festival with a keynote speech. In the weeks leading up to the event, she spent countless hours preparing her message, The speech was not merely about the past, a night marred by cruelty, but about the future, the power of community, the strength found in unity, and the promise that every individual's kindness could light the darkest paths. On the day of the festival, the town square was transformed. Warm fairy lights draped across lampposts, and colorful banners heralded the theme of renewal. Stalls displayed local crafts and homemade treats, while the gentle strains of acoustic music floated through the air. Residents, young and old, mingled freely, their conversations a blend of cautious optimism and determined hope. Margaret, dressed in her finest, albeit modest attire, took the stage with a measured confidence that belied the hardships she had endured. As she began her speech, her voice wavered at first, but soon the words gathered strength. "Today," she said, "we celebrate not only a new beginning, but the extraordinary power of coming together. I have lived through a night of fear and cruelty, but I have also experienced the miraculous intervention of a kind soul and witnessed the unwavering support of an entire community. Let us honor that spirit today and carry it forward in every step we take." The audience responded with a gentle but heartfelt applause, many wiping away tears as they absorbed her message, rising voices and lingering doubts. Even as the festival lifted spirits, a quiet undercurrent of concern began to ripple through the town. Rumors still circulated about the remnants of the biker gang's shadowy figures, who had been linked to the original attacker and whose occasional sightings continued to unsettle a few longtime residents. While local law enforcement had increased patrols and maintained a visible presence, there were moments when the community's newfound sense of security felt fragile, as if it could be shattered by a single act of cruelty. In one such moment, during a lively discussion at one of the festival's interactive workshops on community safety, a young volunteer named Aaron raised a question. "How do we ensure that our progress isn't undone by those who still lurk in the shadows?" he asked, his voice resonating with both hope and apprehension. An elderly woman, her eyes reflecting decades of experience, replied, "We can never be completely free of fear, but we can build a network of trust and vigilance. Every act of kindness makes our community stronger." The conversation sparked a series of open discussions, and by the end of the day, several residents formed an impromptu committee dedicated to enhancing neighborhood safety, a committee that would later meet regularly to coordinate with the police and share information. New beginnings for Russell. Back at Greenfield Department Store, Russell was gradually becoming a respected, if still imperfect, member of the community. Though his past actions were not easily forgotten, his sincere efforts to change had earned him cautious acceptance. Now an active volunteer in the kindness drive and a frequent speaker at local schools about the importance of empathy and accountability, Russell was determined to turn his painful lesson into a force for good. His newly launched blog, A Second Chance in Maple Grove, had attracted a modest but loyal readership. In his posts, he recounted the details of that fateful night, the guilt he had felt, and the steps he was taking to rebuild his character. One blog entry, written on a chilly November morning, read, "I still wake up with a heavy heart remembering how I hurt someone who was already fragile. Today, I promise to greet every customer with a smile and to listen, truly listen to their needs. I want my story to be one of transformation, not regret." His words resonated with many readers, and comments of encouragement began to fill the blog's comment section. Some local businesses even approached him to share his journey, hoping to instill a culture of respect among their employees. Despite his progress, Russell often grappled with self-doubt. Late at night, when the town was quiet and his thoughts turned inward, he would reread the journal entries he had written during his suspension. Sometimes he recalled the piercing look of despair on Margaret's face, a moment that haunted him with the weight of his misdeeds. But each time, he resolved to use that memory as a driving force, a reminder that true change comes from facing one's mistakes head-on and learning from them. Community outreach and a test of unity. The Festival of Renewal marked the peak of community enthusiasm. But as winter deepened, a new challenge emerged that would test the unity of Maple Grove. Late one evening, just as frost began to lace the edges of parked cars, a series of small break-ins occurred in a few homes near the outskirts of town. Though the incidents were minor, nothing more than a few missing items or vandalized mailboxes, they sent ripples of anxiety through the community. Margaret, who had recently begun volunteering at the local senior center, was among those deeply concerned. The news of these break-ins reached her through the Neighborhood Watch Committee, and she attended one of their urgent meetings held at the community center. The room was filled with worried faces, elderly residents, parents, shop owners all sharing their own small accounts of the unsettling events. Denise, the passionate advocate who had earlier rallied the neighborhood against the biker gang, took charge. "We must remain vigilant," she urged. "These incidents, however minor, are reminders that our work is not done. We need to tighten our communication channels and perhaps arrange a few more patrols in the quieter areas." The meeting was filled with spirited discussion, and soon, a plan was laid out, a coordinated effort between the local police, the neighborhood watch, and community volunteers to monitor the affected areas. Russell, now an active member of the community outreach efforts, volunteered to assist by sharing his experiences and advising on how small acts of kindness and mutual respect could build a safer environment. "We have the power to transform our town," he said during one of the meetings, "by being there for one another. Every kind gesture and every moment of alertness helps create a barrier against those who wish us harm." This renewed commitment, born out of both fear and hope, slowly quelled the rising tide of anxiety. Patrols were increased, community hotlines were established, and even a few local businesses contributed funds to install better street lighting in the more isolated neighborhoods. The break-ins, while still a concern, gradually decreased as the sense of collective security strengthened. Michael Jordan's guiding light. Throughout these turbulent months, Michael Jordan continued his quiet watch over Maple Grove. Though he rarely made public appearances, his presence was felt in subtle ways. Local organizers and community leaders often mentioned his visits and the impact of his words at the safety forum. At one particularly memorable event, Michael was invited to speak at a youth center about the importance of standing up for what is right even in the face of adversity. Dressed casually in a soft sweater and jeans, Michael addressed a room full of teenagers and children with a mixture of humility and quiet determination. "When you see someone in need, no matter how small the act may seem, step forward," he said, his gaze sweeping over the attentive faces. "It isn't about being a celebrity, it is about being human. Together, we can create a world where no one is left behind." His message ignited a spark in the young audience, many of whom later joined local volunteer groups and community outreach programs. After the event, a few local residents approached him, sharing their own stories of overcoming hardship and expressing their gratitude for his example. One young man with tears in his eyes said, "You showed me that even when life gets dark, there is always a light. I want to be like you, someone who makes a difference." Michael simply smiled and placed a hand on the young man's shoulder. "It starts with one small act," he replied, "and each one of you has the power to change the world." New alliances and a vision for the future. Inspired by these events, the community of Maple Grove began to see a future where safety, kindness, and accountability were not just ideals but everyday realities. The newly formed Neighborhood Watch expanded its reach, partnering with local schools and businesses to create a network of mutual support. A community website was launched, allowing residents to share information, coordinate patrols, and celebrate the positive changes in their town. Margaret found herself at the heart of these initiatives. Invited to join the planning committee for the upcoming Day of Togetherness, she shared her story with warmth and candor, encouraging others to speak out and help those in need. "We've all been through hard times," she said during one meeting, "but it's our willingness to look out for one another that makes us strong. Every act of kindness builds a bridge over our darkest moments." Russell, too, embraced his role in the new vision for Maple Grove. His blog posts evolved from personal reflections into actionable advice for building a better community. He organized a small workshop on customer service and empathy at the local senior center, where he shared his journey and invited others to learn from his mistakes. "We're all works in progress," he told the attentive audience. "The only way to move forward is to recognize our faults and commit to change." As winter's chill deepened, the town began to prepare for the next holiday season. The lessons learned from that fateful Christmas had become interwoven with the fabric of the community. Residents looked forward to celebrating not only with festive lights and joyful music, but also with the promise of a safer, kinder Maple Grove. Plans were made for improved public spaces, and even the local school announced a new curriculum module on community values and civic responsibility. A glimpse of what lies ahead. Late one snowy evening, As Margaret sat by her window watching the snowflakes dance in the streetlights, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. Despite the lingering memories of that terrifying night, she now saw her life as a tapestry woven with both hardship and hope. The voices of her neighbors, the diligent efforts of local leaders, and the quiet, unwavering guidance of Michael Jordan had all converged to create a new chapter in Maple Grove's story, a chapter defined by resilience, unity, and the transformative power of compassion. In a small act of symbolism, Margaret carefully placed the old, worn slip of paper, the phone number for the Champions Foundation, in a frame on her mantel. It stood as a reminder that even when darkness threatened to engulf her, a beacon of kindness had guided her back to the light. That framed slip of paper, alongside photographs of the community meetings, the safety forum, and snapshots of the Festival of Renewal, became treasured mementos that encapsulated the spirit of a town reborn. As Maple Grove braced itself for the next season of challenges and celebrations, every resident knew that the journey toward lasting change was ongoing. They had learned that while one act of heroism could alter the course of a single life, it was the collective commitment to empathy and vigilance that would secure their future. And so, with a promise to each other and to the memory of the trials they had overcome, Maple Grove marched forward united, vigilant, and ever hopeful. As winter began to ease into the tender promise of early spring, Maple Grove found itself at a crossroads of hope and challenge. The transformative events of the past months had woven a tapestry of resilience throughout the town, yet the community was about to face a fresh test, a challenge that would require everyone to come together in unexpected ways. A new storm on the horizon. Margaret Walker awoke on a brisk morning to find the sky painted in the soft hues of dawn. The remnants of winter still clung to the edges of Maple Grove, with frosty patches lingering on the sidewalks and the air holding a crisp chill. Though the memory of that fateful Christmas night was gradually softening, the emotional scars still echoed in her heart. Today, however, was different. Today, a sense of purpose guided her steps as she prepared to attend a long-awaited town meeting. In the days prior, unsettling rumors had begun to circulate. Whispers of increased criminal activity in the outskirts of Maple Grove, the same area once troubled by the remnants of the biker gang, had unsettled some residents. Though no one had suffered violence since the heroic intervention that saved Margaret, a growing concern over the safety of the neighborhood had stirred debates among local leaders. The Community Watch Committee, which had flourished in the wake of earlier events, now faced the daunting task of preventing a potential resurgence of danger. Margaret, though advanced in years, had become one of the respected voices in these meetings. At the community center, the auditorium was packed with residents eager to discuss ideas for safeguarding their beloved town. The atmosphere was charged with both determination and a palpable anxiety. Local officials, police representatives, and community organizers shared reports and brainstormed strategies. Denise, the impassioned advocate from previous meetings, took center stage once again, urging that they double their patrol efforts and install additional street lighting in vulnerable areas. "We cannot allow fear to creep back into our lives," she declared, her voice firm and resolute. "Every precaution we take now is an investment in our future." New alliances and bold initiatives. Among the gathered crowd, Russell, now more mature and earnest than ever, stepped forward to share his insights. Standing before a semicircular arrangement of chairs, he spoke with humility about his transformation. "I've learned that every day is a chance to build a better community," he said, his eyes reflecting both remorse and hope. "I want to use my experience to encourage everyone to be more compassionate and vigilant. We must be the first to act when we see someone in trouble." His words resonated deeply. Many nodded in agreement, and a few even approached him afterward, thanking him for his courage to admit past mistakes. His journey had become a living lesson, a testament that even those who have faltered can rise again through genuine change. Inspired by the energy of the meeting, the town council proposed a bold new initiative, the creation of a Maple Grove Guardian program. This program would recruit volunteers from all walks of life, seniors, students, local business owners, to form neighborhood patrol groups, equipped with communication devices and coordinated through a centralized community app. The idea was not to replace law enforcement, but to serve as an additional layer of support, ensuring that every resident felt secure and heard. Margaret, who had quietly attended many of these sessions, was asked to serve as an honorary spokesperson for the program. With a gentle smile and a steady voice, she expressed, "I have seen firsthand the power of coming together. Let us remember that our strength lies in our unity, in the willingness to protect one another with kindness and vigilance." The proposal was met with enthusiastic applause. Plans were set in motion, and within weeks the first Maple Grove Guardian teams began their training sessions. These sessions, held at the community center, covered topics ranging from conflict de-escalation to basic first aid. The program's launch was scheduled for a community festival in the coming month, a celebration that would blend safety initiatives with cultural festivities, art, music, and food, symbolizing a fresh start for the town, a personal journey of healing. While the community rallied together, Margaret found herself reflecting on her own personal journey. In the quiet moments after the town meetings, she would sit by her window, gazing out at a street slowly coming alive with the first signs of spring. The scars of that long-ago night when cruelty had threatened to shatter her spirit had begun to mend under the tender care of her family and neighbors. Yet, there was still a lingering sadness for the years spent in isolation. One sunny afternoon, as she walked through a small park near her home, Margaret encountered a familiar face. It was Mrs. Carter, a kindly widow who had also been a regular at the support group. The two women exchanged warm greetings and soon found themselves seated on a weathered bench beneath a blossoming cherry tree. "I used to think that loneliness was my only companion," Margaret confessed softly, "but now every smile, every helping hand, reminds me that I am cherished." Mrs. Carter nodded, her eyes glistening with understanding. Their conversation meandered through memories of past sorrows and the newfound hope that now painted their days. For Margaret, these quiet exchanges were as healing as any community initiative. They were personal affirmations that even in the darkest times, human connection could spark light, a surprise visit that reignited dreams. The gentle progress in Maple Grove took another uplifting turn one chilly evening at the community center. During one of the regular Guardian program training sessions, a surprise guest arrived. The buzz of whispered excitement quickly spread through the room as the door swung open, revealing none other than Michael Jordan. Clad in a casual hoodie and jeans, he exuded an unassuming presence that belied his legendary status. His arrival was a signal that the impact of his earlier heroism was far from forgotten. "Good evening," Michael greeted the gathered volunteers with a warm smile. "I am here to thank you for your dedication and to remind you that every act of vigilance and kindness matters." His words, delivered with genuine sincerity, rekindled a fire in the hearts of everyone present. For many young volunteers, his visit was a call to action, an affirmation that heroes could be found among them as well. After the session, Michael took a moment to speak with Russell. In a quiet corner of the room, the two shared a candid conversation. "I've seen how much you've grown," Michael said softly, his eyes locking with Russell's. "Every day, you make the choice to be better. And that is what truly defines a man. Keep moving forward." Russell's voice trembled with gratitude as he replied, "I never thought I could change, but seeing the community come together has given me hope. I promise I'll continue to do my best." Their exchange, simple yet profound, was a testament to the enduring power of second chances. A new chapter in community life. As the Guardian program took root, Maple Grove began to experience the fruits of unity in tangible ways. Neighborhood patrols became a comforting presence on quiet evenings, and the community app buzzed with daily updates, safety alerts, and messages of encouragement. Local businesses even began offering discounts to members of the Guardian program as a way of supporting the initiative. The sense of togetherness was palpable, a collective heartbeat that had grown stronger since that fateful night of terror. At the same time, the town's renewed focus on safety spurred a wave of cultural and educational events. The local school organized a community day, inviting students, parents, and residents to participate in interactive workshops, art projects, and sports activities that celebrated the values of empathy and resilience. Russell was invited as a guest speaker to share his journey, and his honest account of transformation inspired many, including a group of teenagers who later approached him for advice on handling conflicts at school. Margaret, too, found herself drawn into this new chapter. She agreed to participate in a short documentary produced by the local TV station, an intimate portrayal of Maple Grove's evolution from a town once haunted by fear to one that now thrived on collective care. Sitting in her cozy living room, surrounded by photographs of family reunions and community events, Margaret recounted her experience with a gentle dignity. "I was once afraid to walk alone in a parking lot," she said, her voice steady despite the lingering echoes of past terror. "But now I see that we are stronger together. Every kind word, every helping hand, it has all built a bridge to a safer tomorrow." The documentary, when aired, struck a chord not only in Maple Grove but also in neighboring towns. It became a symbol of hope, a narrative that showed how adversity could be overcome through unity and compassion. Letters of thanks and expressions of admiration poured in, reinforcing the belief that every individual's efforts, no matter how small, could spark meaningful change. Reflections and renewed resolve. In the midst of all these developments, life in Maple Grove settled into a rhythm of cautious optimism. Yet, every so often, moments of reflection reminded the community of the fragility of their hard-earned peace. Late at night, when the town was silent and the stars glimmered above, residents would recall the terrifying echoes of that brutal night, an ever-present reminder of why vigilance was necessary. For Margaret, those moments of solitude were interspersed with memories of the gentle smile on Michael Jordan's face, the humble apology from Russell, and the unwavering support of her neighbors. One particularly clear night, as Margaret sat by her window with a cup of tea, she took a deep breath and looked at the framed slip of paper on her mantel, the very number for the Champions Foundation that had once seemed like a lifeline. It now symbolized not just a rescue from cruelty, but a continuing promise that help was always within reach. With a quiet smile, she whispered to herself, "We've come so far, and yet there is still so much to build. Together, we can light up even the darkest nights." Across town, Russell sat at his small desk in his modest apartment, scrolling through comments on his latest blog post. The feedback was overwhelmingly positive, testimonies of personal transformation, messages of forgiveness, and pledges to support community initiatives. Although his past mistakes still haunted him on quiet nights, he now found solace in knowing that every day was a chance to make amends. He began drafting plans for a new workshop series, one that would focus on conflict resolution for young people. "Maybe by sharing my story," he wrote, "I can help others avoid the mistakes I made." Michael Jordan, ever the quiet guardian, continued his unassuming visits to community events and schools. His mentorship and occasional surprise appearances became a comforting constant, a reminder that even legends could walk among ordinary people, lending strength and inspiration when it was needed most. A glimpse into tomorrow. As Maple Grove prepared to step into a new season, the collective energy of its residents was palpable. The Guardian program was proving effective. The Community Watch had become a model for neighboring towns, and the spirit of togetherness had seeped into every corner of the town. Plans were underway for a grand day of togetherness, celebration in the coming months, a festival that would blend the arts, community service, and safety initiatives into a joyful testament of what unity could achieve. Margaret, standing amid a small group of friends and neighbors one afternoon, listened as they discussed the upcoming event with excitement. "Imagine a day where we all celebrate our strength," one of them said. "A day where every face in Maple Grove is a reminder that we've built something unbreakable." Margaret's eyes glistened with quiet pride. Though she had once felt invisible and vulnerable, she now saw herself reflected in the collective strength of her community. As the days turned into weeks, the town's renewed spirit grew ever stronger. Though challenges still loomed on the horizon, every resident of Maple Grove knew that their shared commitment to kindness and vigilance would always be their greatest shield. And in that shared commitment, they found the courage to look forward with hope. The winter chill had finally begun to give way to the tender promise of spring, and Maple Grove was abuzz with a renewed sense of hope. In the months following the tumultuous events of that cold Christmas night, the community had come together like never before. Now, the entire town was preparing for the much-anticipated Day of Togetherness, a grand celebration that would mark not only the resilience of its people, but also the lasting changes that had been set in motion, a day to celebrate unity. On the morning of the celebration, the streets of Maple Grove shimmered under the soft glow of the early sun. Banners in warm, inviting hues adorned lampposts and storefronts. The local community center, now a hub for numerous support programs, had been transformed into a vibrant festival ground. Music filled the air as local bands performed folk tunes, and the aroma of freshly baked goods from food stalls mingled with the crisp scent of spring. Margaret Walker, once a solitary soul burdened by loneliness and fear, now stood as a pillar of strength and inspiration. Dressed in a bright, cheerful outfit that reflected her renewed spirit, she greeted neighbors and friends with a warm smile. In her hands, she clutched a bouquet of freshly picked wildflowers, a symbol of nature's ability to bloom after the harshest winter. For her, the day of togetherness was more than just a festival. It was a celebration of life, of every small act of kindness that had stitched together a community. At the center of the festivities, a large stage had been set up. Local officials, community organizers, and even representatives from the Maple Grove Guardian program gathered to share stories and honor those who had played pivotal roles in the town's transformation. Bradley Monroe, the store manager whose commitment to safety had reshaped Greenfield Department Store, took the stage first. Today, he began, we celebrate not only our collective resilience, but also the promise that when we stand together, no force of cruelty can ever overcome us. Applause broke out across the square, echoing the sentiments of every person present. In the audience, Russell, now a reformed and dedicated volunteer, sat in the front row. His eyes glistened with humility and pride as he listened to Bradley's words. For him, the journey from cruelty to compassion had been long and painful, yet it had also been transformative. He knew that his past mistakes would always be a part of his story, but they no longer defined him. Today, he was resolved to keep spreading his message of empathy and accountability, personal triumphs and community bonds. As the ceremony continued, speakers shared moving testimonials. One local teacher recounted how the community's initiatives had changed the school environment, making it safer and more nurturing for students. A young parent spoke of the tangible benefits brought by the Guardian program: more secure streets, better communication with local law enforcement, and the comfort of knowing that neighbors were watching out for one another. Margaret herself was invited to speak. Standing before the sea of familiar faces, she took a deep breath and began softly. I once feared walking alone in a dark parking lot, burdened by the weight of my loneliness. I never imagined that one cold, cruel night would become the catalyst for so much love and support. Her voice grew steadier with each word. Thanks to the bravery of Michael Jordan, the sincere efforts of Russell, and the unwavering kindness of all of you, I now see that even the darkest nights can give way to the brightest mornings. Her words resonated deeply, drawing tears and smiles alike. In that moment, the story of that terrible night, the shattered gift bags, the fear, the pain transformed into a beacon of hope. It was a reminder that adversity, when met with unity, can spark change beyond measure. After the formal speeches, the festival burst into life. Booths lined the streets where residents could learn more about the new safety measures, join the Guardian program, or simply share stories of personal triumph. Children ran through the park playing games, while elders chatted contentedly over cups of steaming coffee. Local artists showcased murals that depicted the evolution of Maple Grove from shadows of fear to a vibrant tapestry of community care. Everywhere the air buzzed with a contagious energy, as if the town had truly been reborn. Michael Jordan's enduring legacy. Though Michael Jordan had rarely sought the spotlight, his influence was unmistakable on this day of celebration. A discreet photograph of him, taken during one of his surprise visits to the community center, was displayed on a large screen near the stage. The image captured him with his signature calm yet determined gaze, a reminder of the night he had stepped in to protect Margaret. His intervention had not only saved a life but had ignited a movement in Maple Grove. Local organizers spoke of his continuing visits to schools and community events. In one touching moment captured on video, a group of children at a youth center excitedly explained how they had been inspired to form their own volunteer club after hearing his story. Michael's simple message that each act of kindness could ripple out to create lasting change had become a mantra for the town. Later that afternoon, as the festivities continued, a quiet corner of the park became a memorial of sorts. A makeshift display showcased items from that fateful night: a torn gift bag, a framed copy of the slip of paper with the Champions Foundation's number, and a handwritten note from Margaret. The note read, "In our darkest hour, a hero reminded us that hope is real." Visitors paused at the display, reflecting on the journey that had brought them together. For many, It was a powerful testament to the fact that even in moments of cruelty, humanity could prevail, forging a future of hope. As twilight settled over Maple Grove, the day of togetherness culminated in a grand communal dinner held at the community center. Long tables were set up in a spacious hall, draped with white tablecloths and adorned with flickering candles. Neighbors, friends, and even people from neighboring towns joined in, sharing hearty meals and even heartier conversations. Laughter mingled with soft music, and every shared toast reinforced the collective promise that Maple Grove would never again succumb to fear. Margaret, seated at the head of one of the tables with her newly reunited family, looked around with quiet satisfaction. Her daughter, Rachel, and grandchildren sat close by, their faces radiant with joy, as they passed dishes laden with seasonal treats. Margaret's thoughts drifted to the many souls who had contributed to the town's transformation. From the dedicated efforts of the Guardian program to the heartfelt confessions on Russell's blog, every act had woven a fabric of solidarity and trust. That night, as the dinner wound down and the last of the candles flickered out, Margaret stepped outside for a moment of solitude. The cool night air carried the distant hum of conversation and the soft murmur of contented neighbors. Looking up at a sky awash with stars, she felt a deep, abiding sense of gratitude. In the midst of hardship, she had discovered that hope was not a fleeting emotion, but a steadfast force, a force that could bring people together and create miracles. Across town, Russell sat at his desk, reflecting on the day's events and the journey that had led him to this point. His blog now boasted thousands of encouraging comments, and he had received letters from people inspired by his transformation. Though he knew his past could never be entirely erased, he was determined to honor it by continuing to learn, grow, and help build a safer, kinder community. And Michael Jordan, he continued to watch over Maple Grove with a quiet vigilance, occasionally stepping in to offer guidance or encouragement. His legendary presence a constant reminder that heroism comes in many forms. The final promise. As the community slowly dispersed that night, the echo of laughter and shared stories lingered in the crisp air. Maple Grove had emerged from the darkness of its past, not as a victim, but as a beacon of resilience. Every resident now carried a piece of that transformative journey in their hearts, a promise that no one would ever have to face cruelty alone again. Margaret returned to her home with a lightness in her step and a smile that spoke of new beginnings. She placed the framed slip of paper on her mantel, right next to family photographs and mementos of happier times. It was a small token, but it symbolized everything: the power of a single act of kindness, the strength found in unity, and the enduring belief that hope can triumph over even the darkest adversity. As the final stars faded with the approach of dawn, Maple Grove slept peacefully, united in the silent promise of a future built on compassion, vigilance, and an unwavering commitment to each other.